and respect. Excuse me, with honor and respect the lands upon which we now reside and the First Nations, many of whom are listed on this image here. It is also our role to honor the perspective and customs of tribal families and their experiences with public early learning programs. Today, I'm coming to you from the truly beautiful intersection of the ancestral lands of the Squaxin Island, Coast Salish, Cowlitz, and Nisqually tribes, all of whom at one time or another have been stewards of this beautiful land that we currently refer to as Tumwater. If you know the ancestral lands upon which you reside and are joining us from today, please feel free to acknowledge that in the chat. And if you don't yet know, the links that Alondra will be placing in the chat can help you learn more about Washington tribes. Next slide, please. In focusing on equity, we also want to acknowledge the pain and trauma resulting from our country's historical roots in systemic racism. And we continue to stand in solidarity with our communities of color during these unprecedented times of civil unrest, international unrest, especially with those who identify and or categorized as Black or African American. As we continue to focus our efforts on leading with racial equity, we invite partnership and accountability in this important work. We should also take this moment to recognize the deep inequities that have challenged early learning efforts due to persistent misogynistic beliefs about the role of women and child rearing. Next slide, please. So with that, we thank you again for being here today and just want to share the purpose of this network, which is to support school districts in identifying and developing inclusive, anti-biased, asset-based school improvement strategies focused on the early years, pre-K through third grade. The network supports OSPI's vision of an equity-based whole child educational system and reflects the efforts of school districts striving to build early learning programs that close opportunity gaps and develop strong foundations for future learning. Superintendent of Public Instruction Chris Rakedahl named building strong foundations for early learners as a key strategic goal for OSPI, with high priority objectives across the pre-K third grade continuum, which includes increasing access to inclusive preschool programs, transitional kindergarten, dual language learning, and best practices for K-3 in assessment and instruction. Each of the 9 educational service districts to help co-host this network share a commitment to increasing student access and participation in high quality early learning and elementary. We like to remind folks that throughout the day, you might hear us refer to pre-K third grade or P3 interchangeably, and sometimes you might hear prenatal to 3 or third, and all of these things refer to the broad range of human development that we consider early childhood and that encompass many different early learning programs that public schools offer, like pregnant and parenting teen programs, play and learn groups, inclusive preschool, and grades all the way up through third grade. So this wide span is the focus of this network. As we just take a moment to recognize our efforts and our goals and our focus, I would also just like to take this opportunity to thank each of you for being here today. If we were meeting in person, I would want to shake your hand and look you in the eyes, greeting each of you personally to express the gratitude that I feel for your dedication to children and families and how much we appreciate your efforts. Thank you for everything that you do every day and also for being here today. We hope that today provides inspiration to you and a sense of camaraderie and support. Next slide. Alondra is going to be dropping a link to the agenda in the chat. When you click on that link, you will be prompted to make a copy, which we encourage you to do. This version of the agenda will include a self-reflection and some other links that we will be using today. So our focus today is early learning environments, and we look forward to an interview with our special guests from Edmond School District. There will be time to reflect on early learning in your environments in your own program and to discuss the things that you are hearing today with colleagues in the regional breakout sessions. Today, after those breakout sessions, we're going to come back together for some final thoughts and feedback. And then after each of the sessions, each of the pre-K third grade leadership network sessions, we also host an optional 30-minute open networking period. And during this time, participants will have the choice of joining me in the main Zoom room here together. Anyone who would like to stay, you could also return to your regional breakouts for continued discussion, or Alondra can set you up in a private breakout room with your team if you want to use it for some extra planning time. So we hope that you will join us for that. Next slide, please. So we have chosen the framework for planning, implementing, and evaluating P3 approaches from the National P3 Center as the basis for this network. We did that because early learning is more than a program that operates in schools or within districts. It's also a multifaceted school reform initiative with strategies that need to be put into place at all levels of a comprehensive P12 system. The framework is solidly grounded in research and evidence-based practices, and it's also laid out in a useful way for planning and evaluating our systems at multiple levels. So Alondra will be putting a link in the chat to the framework, which you can also access via a link in your agenda. Next slide, please. So the P3 framework has identified 8 major buckets or categories of efforts that structure a comprehensive approach to P3 reform. Today, we're focused on the bucket of early learning environments. And before we take a look at the strategies that the National P3 Center has organized within that bucket, I would just like to share a few words on the critical nature of early learning environments and focus us on a couple of publications that raise important considerations for the future of state-funded and district-based early learning programs, which I think really generate a call to action for us here in this state. Next slide, please. So each year, the National Institute of Early Education Research, known as NEAR, which is at Rutgers University, releases a State of Preschool Yearbook. They've been doing this since the 2001-2000 school year, and the yearbook has tracked state-funded preschool programs, funding, access, and policies. The yearbook contains information for every state on child enrollment, funding, staffing, and quality standards, and it also includes information about where children are served, operating schedules, and other program features of state-funded preschool. The yearbook seeks to improve the public's knowledge and understanding of state efforts to expand the availability of high-quality education to young children. It's looked to by policymakers, advocates, and researchers to inform decisions about early childhood education. The yearbook also includes an assessment of state policies using a set of minimum quality standards, benchmarks that reflect research on effective early childhood education. This March, for the first time, transitional kindergarten will be included in the NEAR yearbook. And even though transitional kindergarten is a program of kindergarten, it is included in this yearbook and held to the same standards as Washington State's funded preschool program, ECAP, the Early Childhood Education and Assistance Program, which will also be featured. So next slide, please. It makes sense that the NEAR report and the yearbook would apply the same quality standard benchmarks to preschool and transitional kindergarten, given that both programs are intended to serve preschool-age children. It would also make sense to apply these quality standards to the full pre-K third grade span of district-based programs. This visual that we're showing here is a progression for development and learning from Teaching Strategies Gold, which is the assessment tool used in WAKids, as well as many preschool programs. This particular progression that we're looking at is from the social emotional area and is the objective of regulating emotions. It spans the emotional regulation, the development of emotional regulation from birth through third grade. The bolded font along each of the columns along the top describes a milestone of development along this progression, and each color band below represents an age range starting at birth. The green color band represents 3-year-olds, the blue color band represents 4-year-olds, the purple is kindergarten, and so on. The color bands are laid out along the progressions to show how we typically anticipate the acquisition of skills or behaviors to unfold from birth through third grade through age 8. So this is a great depiction of the overlapping nature of child development. And notice how much overlap there is right here in this circled area. We can see from the overlap that some 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, and 4-year-olds are already just beginning to be able to self-regulate in new situations or stressful situations. And we can also see that by the end of kindergarten and well into the first grade, which is the pink color band, the children are working to manage strong emotions in an appropriate manner most of the time. Knowing the developmental stages is helpful for building the kinds of learning environments, which include lots of peer and child interactions and play-based opportunities that allow children to practice and develop foundational skills such as this. Next slide, please. Knowing child development generally, of course, is critical, and so is knowing individual children's development for adapting early learning environments. So what we're looking at here is WaKids kindergarten entry data from fall 2019, which is the last year of data that we have on record before the pandemic. Each bar of the graph above the graph displays the range of skills and abilities of incoming kindergartners across the areas of development and learning that are assessed through WaKids: cognitive, language, literacy, math, physical, and social emotional development. Again, each of the colors represents an age range. So for instance, here, orange encompasses birth through age 2, but again, blue represents 4-year-olds and purple represents the kindergarten age range. These colors on the bar show us here, as they're displayed in this WaKids visual, show us the proportion of children entering kindergarten with the skills that we would most typically attribute to the age associated by color. So for instance, looking at the range of development for social emotional learning, which is the last graph on the bar here, we can see that about a quarter of incoming kindergartners have the social emotional development that we would most typically associate to children ages 3 or younger. And now note how many children enter kindergarten still in that preschool range of development, that blue color band. And just by the way, our student information team here at OSPI will be releasing WaKids data from this past fall in this coming spring. So it's not quite available. It's much later than usual, but it is coming soon. Also, a reminder that WaKids data is available to teachers and schools immediately upon assessment completion, and that the tool is open and available to kindergarten and TK teachers for ongoing assessment if they wish to use it as part of WaKids and beyond to measure student progress in foundational areas of learning and development. At our pre-K third grade leadership network back in January, our guests from Griffin School District had a lot of enthusiasm for their experiences using the WaKids Assessment Tool Teaching Strategies Gold more frequently than just the one-time program entry requirement of WaKids. And I would encourage any of you to reach out to your ESD or contact us here at OSPI for more information or support with WaKids implementation. But basically, this data display is a great depiction of that range of development present in a given classroom. And it is an important reason that we need similar expectations for the learning environments of young children and to use measures that are designed for them. The developmental skills that they need to build foundationally need to occur in spaces and with schedules designed for their specific learning and development needs. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, transitional kindergarten will be featured in the State of Preschool Yearbook, which will be released later in March, some point in time. And as tempted as I am to spill the beans to you all on what score TK was given by NEAR in this upcoming yearbook, you are just going to have to stay tuned over the next several weeks to see this for yourself. Alondra is going to drop in the link to the chat where the new report will be posted by NEAR. But what I can share with you is a couple things. TK, the rating that we will receive is one that we should all be prepared to speak to. And while I can also share, I can't share the rating with you, I can share the evaluation criteria that was used, which is based on the existence or non-existence of specific policies that support a base minimum of quality standards. So that is what you see listed here. These are the 10 policy areas that, the 10 policy areas that NEAR evaluated Washington's transitional kindergarten program on, and is the basis of the score that we will receive. And our partners at DCYF and the programs, the ECAP programs, will also receive a score from NEAR in the upcoming playbook. But as you look at these policies, which do you think that we would get points for? Which would you get points for in your own district? And how many of these benchmarks that we see in front of us contribute directly to the quality of early learning environments? Maybe all of them. And how much of these do districts have control to improve, even without policies or changes at a state or federal level? Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. NEAR is not the only group focused on what is and or is not happening in early learning settings in public schools. This January, a study called The Effects of Statewide Pre-K Programs on Children's Achievement and Behavior through 6th Grade was published. Alondra is going to put the link to the study in the chat. It was published by Kelly Durkin, Mark Lipsey, and Dale Farron, Sarah Weisner. And we think that this research is going to increase the scrutiny on preschool programs receiving state funding and likely raise questions as to the extent to which these programs are truly setting children up for success. I want to tell you just a little bit about the study, and I'll be quite honest with you, I'm still digesting a lot of it myself. It followed almost 3,000 children in Tennessee schools that were funded through the state's preschool program, and it looked at the long-term impacts of the state's preschool program up through 6th grade, which we know this can be really a challenging thing to do, this kind of longitudinal study, for a lot of reasons. But findings included that the effects of the Tennessee state preschool program on individually assessed early achievement measures at the beginning of the preschool year were strong, especially in literacy measures, but followed over time, those effects disappeared by the end of kindergarten and turned negative by the end of 3rd grade. And subsequently, the achievement effects increased across the negative impacts across those outgoing years was also seen. So started strong at the beginning of kindergarten, by the end of kindergarten, looking at some of those gains fading, and that fade continuing into 3rd grade and beyond. Also, the same increasing negative trends for disciplinary infractions occurred. So children involved in state-funded preschool programs actually having greater incidence of behavior and disciplinary infractions as they continued through the grades. So interesting. And among the conclusions being drawn about the Tennessee programs is that they have those policy measures in place that we just looked at, and that looks good on paper, but one of the concerns was not having the mechanisms for quality control to make sure that teachers were following those best practices. And there was also evidence pointing to significant underfunding of the state program to adequately provide the program supports and necessities. The study also pointed to a couple of other things that I think really point to the importance of early learning environments. There was some suggestion that one of the pieces that's overlooked in the learning environment is what they considered unconstrained learning, that most of the focus of learning was based around constrained kinds of skills. For example, the alphabet. The fact that there's 26 letters in the alphabet, that is a constrained skill. Once you learn all those letters, you've learned that thing. And that we focus mostly on those constrained kind of skills, when some research really supporting, lots of research really supporting the idea of unconstrained skills, like things like working memory and attention to detail, and things children might gain through some of the play-based learning that we really strongly promote and undergird more important skill development down the road, that there are fewer opportunities for children to engage in that type of skill development. And then regarding the concerns about behavior, there was also some speculation about what might be leading to the negative behavioral outcomes over time. And some of that speculation includes that programs are preventing children from developing internal self-control necessary for long-term development. And again, kind of pointing to how we structure the early learning environments to provide children with those opportunities to develop that self-control and that opportunity to interact in their environment with some autonomy. So again, personally, I need more time to read and contemplate this study. I hope that you each take a look at it. There are also a number of responses that have been written in reaction to this research, and I think will continue to reverberate as others really think about these implications. But again, I fully expect that we'll be asked about these publications, especially as the NEAR report comes out and is very directly speaking to programs in our state. And I would encourage us to really think about, if we're asked to on what we think these implications are in our state, that we're prepared to speak to that ourselves. And I do think that today is going to be a great opportunity for us to begin to think about that. Unfortunately, there's really no shortage of tools or research to support us in this quest to increase in early learning environments and improve them in our public schools. I'm excited that we'll be digging into some of those, hearing about some of those later today. But we also have the wonderful resource that we have identified in the P3 framework. So I'm going to bring us back to that, if we can move to the next slide. So just a bit of a backing up to remind us about how the framework is laid out. All of the buckets are laid out in this same format with an overarching goal, strategies culled from research, examples of implementation indicators categorized by key stakeholder groups, and a quick depth of implementation self-assessment, which we're going to take some time to do today, and then examples of evaluation approaches that you might engage in for the purposes of evaluating the activities within this bucket. Next slide, please. So here within the early learning, the learning environments bucket, the P3 framework establishes the goal that learning environments for early learning environments that the physical space and school program culture promote collaborative relationships, actively engage all children in a variety of learning experiences and settings, and support the health and wellness of children and adults. Next slide. It's also organized by 3 groupings of categories of strategy: culturally inclusive, learning environments that are welcoming and reflect the community of children and their families, home communities and cultures; the strategy of promoting relationships, which is learning environments that provide a climate that promotes positive interaction and supports relationship development for children and adults; and then also the strategy of structured supports for diverse learners, learning environments that are organized and provided with resources to support a wide range of development and abilities. Next slide, please. All right, so this is just a little more explanation of some of the features included in the framework itself. And we're going to take a moment to do this self-assessment, this depth of implementation. So I think if we go to the next slide. Is that two? Yes, okay. So within the P3 framework and also available to you on the agenda. So Alondra's going to drop that agenda link back again so that you can access these reflective questions. We'd like you to just give you a moment to think about which of these strategies are present in your own programs, these indicators. And then we're going to ask you to engage with us in a little protocol. And we're going to ask you to choose a strategy from this list of something that you're doing well in your early learning environments. And then we're going to ask you for an area of growth, a glow and a grow. So just going to give you 1 minute here just to look at these and to think about that. And then we're going to tee up a waterfall activity and ask you to give us some sharing. All right, so without moving to the next slide, please be thinking about a glow, one strategy from this list that you're doing well. And if you wouldn't mind, just begin to type it into the chat. Don't send yet, but we want everyone to tee up in the chat something that they really feel a strategy that is going well, something that you're doing well in your early learning environments. So just give folks a minute. And so actually, Rachel, if you could just go ahead and advance to the slide, this will just remind us how we want to set this protocol up and what the question is. And then I'll just give a little countdown. I hope we're giving everyone enough time to think about this. So then I'm going to just count down from 3 and then ask everyone to launch their chat. So 3, 2, 1. Awesome. Please keep typing, and if you haven't finished your thought on what your glow is, we would love to capture it. We'll save this chat and share back at our next network meeting the areas that folks felt that they were really able to glow about their early learning environments. So let's go ahead and advance the slide in this. Just try this again. Ask folks to think about an area, and it doesn't have to be from the checklist. It can just be from something that you know that you're working on in your environment. So we could do the same thing. I'll just give 1 minute here for you to come up with a response, an area of growth, and then we'll ask you to share it. All right. Hope that was enough time. Let's just do the countdown and then ask you to share out in the chat 3, 2, 1. Please share with us some area of growth. Awesome. I can see the chat numbers increasing and people adding those. I apologize, I can't see the chat very well from my screen, but thank you for adding that into the chat and giving us an opportunity to see what you're thinking or your areas of glow and grow. Next slide, please. All right, this is the moment I've been waiting for, an opportunity to hear from our guest district, Edmonds. But before I do, I would like to first introduce Maureen Hodge, who is the Early Learning Coordinator at Northwest Educational Service District 189, up there in beautiful Anacortes. Maureen is the P3 lead for the AESD network as well, and she is going to facilitate this conversation that we have looked forward to with our colleagues here in Edmonds. So with that, we're going to take down the slides and we're going to invite Maureen to step forward and get us started in this wonderful conversation. Thanks, Maureen.
Great, thanks so much, Karma. I am excited to introduce to you Darcy Becker, Director of Early Learning at Woodway Center for Edmonds School District, and also Dr. Wes Keller, Program Manager, Alderwood Early Childhood Center, Principal and Student Services. We are going to start with some questions. And the first question is a two-part question. So Darcy, when if you're ready to go, how do you define a high quality early learning environment?
When I defined a high quality early learning environment when I first came to Edmonds, I developed a kind of my own definition, which is rigorous, play-based, and responsive. So kind of unpacking that definition, which is kind of my own definition. People will have other ones. That rigorous means to me that it is carefully and intentionally designed. Your instruction, your environments are very, very intentional and are designed to promote children moving in their development from their current stage on, that it's play-based, it's hands-on, experiential, holistic. We often see in elementary grades that we start kind of siloing content, and in an early learning environment, we really, and that includes up through grades, up through age 8, having our learning be related and holistic is really important for the learning of young children. And responsive, by what I mean by responsive is that the learning or the environment would be informed, knowledgeable, flexible, that children, and I do have some photos to share later or soon that shows kind of some ways that teachers have responded to the needs that the students display in their classrooms. Developmentally appropriate practice has 3 components, and I call those development, knowledge, and context. So development meaning a deep understanding of how humans learn, how they learn and how their learning and their growth progresses from stage to stage or age to age. Knowledgeable or being knowledgeable is not just about having the knowledge of child development, but the knowledge of your specific children in front of you. So having data, observations, their strengths, their learning edges, and context being their family, their community, the communities that they come from or represent, goals that are set and in concert with families that really demonstrate their aspirations for their children and honors their culture and values, values, and language. I think I also think about hiring well and being very intentional about onboarding teachers, and then having an ongoing development process for all of the adults that are in different roles within an early learning environment or team. And then I would say you need to have a relentless pursuit, right? A relentless pursuit of focusing on the right things. And the right things, as I define them, are executive function and emotion regulation. And I think that kind of goes back to the research and those articles that Karma called out for us today, and really focusing on those high value skills that will translate across a person's lifetime. So I would say that that's how I kind of define high quality, developmentally appropriate early learning environment.
Fantastic. Thank you, Darcy. Part 2 of that question is, what does a high quality early learning environment actually look like?
So I do have a PowerPoint. Can someone cue that up for me? Or should I share my screen? How are we going to do this?
Whichever
Darcy,
way
you're
you
welcome.
want.
Yeah, up to you. You should be enabled to go ahead and share.
Okay, great. I just have to, you know how Zoom is, you have to have it in the right place to be able to share it. So let me see here. That's my screen too. So I am a visual person. I like to actually I like to actually see environments. So hang on a minute, my PowerPoint's loading. Everything's a little bit slowed down. Everyone is taking attendance in the classrooms. Can you tell? The network is slowed. All right. Can you see that now, everyone? Marie,
Looks
can
great.
you see that? Okay.
Yep, we can see it.
So I'm a very visual person. I like to see photos of spaces, and that helps me to think about those spaces. This is actually a preschool classroom. And as you would expect in preschool classrooms, the classroom is organized into spaces, spaces where children collect, or they group together, and they work on different skills, and there's a lot of choice available to the students for where they want to be, what they want to be doing, how they want to be utilizing that space. This is another preschool classroom. I'm at Woodway Center, which is a new early learning center in the Edmonds School District, and we have pre-K, 3-year-olds through kindergarten. So we have 3 through 6th grade, 6-year-olds on our campus, and it's just a wonderful place to be. And so you'll see, again, in a preschool classroom, the space is divided among community workspaces or small group workspaces and choice center areas. This is a kindergarten classroom here at Woodway Center. And here at Woodway Center, we have classrooms where due to the restrictions around social distancing, we started the school year in this big configuration. We're now moving to a more typical kindergarten configuration soon, next week. But for right now, we have been, some of our center materials have been kind of moved to the external spaces in the room to allow a little bit more physical distancing. But you'll see we still have students grouped together. So we still have pairs of students sitting together, and community spaces on the floor. This is another kindergarten classroom, and you can see how that teacher has organized space in a very similar configuration. This is a 3rd kindergarten classroom. So our kindergarten classrooms look very similar throughout our building. One of the things that I said that we focus on is social emotional skills, emotion regulation, those executive function skills, being able to focus. So we work across our grades here we have a district adopted curriculum, 2nd step. And so these are 2nd step materials. We also use conscious discipline materials and strategies. But these are some examples of spaces in our sorry, I have a child walking in my room or my office right now. Okay, there we go. These pictures are pictures of calming spaces, quiet spaces, individual spaces for children. You see on the left picture on the top, there is a wish you well posting in the classroom. That's a conscious discipline strategy. So some of our students who have an anxiety reaction to other students being absent or not being there, we wish our children well if they're not there. So we acknowledge that they're not there and wish them well for the day. And as you would expect in an early learning environment, lots of soft surfaces. It's very important for 3 and 4-year-olds to have soft surfaces. And so, I'll talk about that here in a little bit. All of our classrooms, the students have jobs. And so they all have and rotate different responsibilities around the classroom. The left-hand side is an example of kindergarten. The right is preschool. So we do student jobs so the children feel a sense of ownership and they feel like they are part of the classroom and not just visitors to the classroom. We use a lot of visuals. So, and we use these visuals not just in preschool, but we use these in K as well. So core boards, we have a social story about a fire drill because it's going to be loud, there's going to be flashing lights, we need to know what to do. So all of our teachers here in our building use the social story to talk through planning for a fire drill. And then we use a lot of environmental print like stop on doors where we want children to, if there's a doorknob that we don't want them to just blow through, we use some environmental text for that. We also need to think about physical care or personal care of children. And so having changing spaces, having supplies that are readily available as children, especially I think in kindergarten, we often anticipate that children are going to come to school potty trained. And if they come to kindergarten and they are not potty trained, that's unusual. For a 4-year-old, that is not terribly unusual, that there will be children who are not fully potty trained when they come, if they're coming to transitional kindergarten as a 4-year-old. So it's just something you need to be prepared for. And we use a lot of pictures because a lot of our young children are not reading yet. And so we need to make sure that our environmental print or our environmental examples of how you care for yourself are also accessible by the young children. These are interest spaces in a preschool classroom, and preschool classrooms. And one of the reasons why I think it's really important to talk with you today about preschool classroom, what preschool classrooms look like, is because when you are teaching children in a transitional kindergarten, you are teaching 4-year-old children. They are actually preschool aged children. And so the environment needs to match the development of the children, not the children. The children adapt to the environment of kindergarten. So we really need to think about how we use the environment. So thinking about different interest centers that we might, and materials that we might have in a classroom. This is actually a kindergarten classroom. So the former picture was showed, let me go back to it, showed interest centers that are organized by spaces. In kindergarten, our interest centers are more flexible. So there might not be an actual space, but there are materials that children can access, they can pull out, they can use, they can join with other friends. And so we rely less on the environment to control that and more on the skill level of the children to be able to manage materials. This particular teacher, the reason I really wanted to show this this classroom is that this teacher made some observations of her children in the fall and said, my children really aren't into the dramatic play center, but they are really into the dollhouse. And so she was just observing her children and said, I really need to make sure that I have enough materials, different types of materials for the children to use the dollhouse in the way that they want to, in a child directed way. And so you'll see in her in this this dollhouse, many of the different toys that are available to play with in the dollhouse are all in proximity to that dollhouse. So the dollhouse can be moved, and those bins of materials can be pulled out, taken to a table, and utilized by students. And then older students, like kindergarten students, 5, 6-year-olds, have developed the skill of being able to manage materials in spaces. Here's some spaces of like a common whole group space or carpet time space, and what different kinds of materials might be available in that. You'll see the preschool version on the left is much sparser, or it has fewer materials available. And then the kindergarten space on the right has a lot of different manipulatives that pairs of students or groups of students might pull out during a whole group lesson or activity. These are all pictures from preschool. And so these are examples in my mind of what transitional kindergarten should be looking like. We use a lot of textiles in our rooms. And so the picture on the upper right is a teacher who has quite a collection of sarongs with a variety of different fabrics. And he uses those to cover spaces that are not available right now. So during whole group time, these blocks are covered. And so the children in the classroom know that those materials are not available right now. So very, very interesting. And one of the challenges is always having appropriate sized spaces for young children. Luckily here at Woodway Center, we are focused on all young children. So we have 3 through 6-year-olds. So our library is, there are texts that are available, but they're all lower on the shelves because our children are not tall enough to access higher up. And the collection is all focused on young children. We have quite a large selection of board books, for instance, because many of our 3-year-olds are really still learning how to handle materials like texts and books. So that's some pictures from our library. And then we also have a gross motor or sensory room here at the school, and just some pictures of different kind of equipment that we have available. Our outdoor space is also very flexible for the range of children that we have. So we have a couple of swings, which are very, very popular. We have a smaller big toy, what we call the small big toy. And then we have the big toy, which you can see in the background here, that provide appropriate spaces for the range of young children that we have here at Woodway Center. And of course, lots of other gross motor kinds of activities like bikes and balls and other kinds of materials. Getting ready to put in a mud kitchen. So those are some examples. That's the, let me stop my share. Those are some examples of spaces here at Woodway Center, and how we think about the progression of spaces from preschool to kindergarten. And of course, now these pictures are taken now. So a kindergarten classroom in the fall looks a little bit different than it does right now, because the children have grown and developed. So
thank you so much, Darcy. Wes, what tools and resources have you found helpful in evaluating early learning environments?
Well, thank you. I'm going to talk about two nationally recognized tools, but first I want to make a couple of points. One is that the classroom environment I really consider foundational. It's not a surprise that in the Head Start house, in the Early Achievers house, in the pyramid model, classroom environments are at the bottom of those structures. They are foundational. And you know, one thing I talk with my teachers a lot about is that classroom environment, when arranged thoughtfully and engaging with materials and activities that are really fun, can act like an additional teacher. So it can act like that second teacher, or in some of my developmental preschool classrooms, a third teacher or fourth teacher. And second is that changing human behavior is really infinitely complex, whereas rearranging furniture, adding, subtracting, or rearranging materials is relatively simple, and it can have a really big impact. So the two tools I'm going to talk about, one is really about the environment, and one is about interactions, but you've got to have that foundational environment for those interactions to work. So the first is the Early Childhood Environment Rating Scale. I saw someone mention in the chat earlier, there's a revised version, and there's also a third version that sometimes folks call Ecker's 3 or E3. The E3 version is great in that it has included the measurement of some of those student-teacher interactions. It is very comprehensive of what an early childhood classroom will look like. There are versions for infant toddlers, family childcares, and there is a school-age version. I'm not as versed in it. I'm very much a preschool birth to 3 person, so my depth of knowledge starts to wane after kindergarten. But I think it's really especially helpful in looking at these learning environment buckets when you're thinking about things like cultural inclusion. There's an entire item there that really just talks about what are the materials and how you are going to use them in your environment in terms of family photos, dramatic play clothes that represent the different types of foods, wall display, and so much more, and gives you some ideas of how you can have that diversity in your classroom be represented across age, culture, ability, gender, and more. And it goes, in depth as having different skin tones and abilities represented, but it also considers things like glasses. People who wear glasses, that is technically a different ability. I used to wear glasses. I have my contacts in now because I get fogged up with my mask. But I think it really provides that great comprehensive view of what cultural inclusion in terms of the materials can represent. And that's just sort of one factor. It also has great items that spoke to some of the things that Darcy talked about, such as soft items, right? The need for students to escape the cold linoleum floors of some of our classrooms and get into a cushy couch or a soft pillow or something like that. And it has the reasoning for that. The second tool I'm going to talk about is the classroom assessment scoring system, which once again has for infant toddlers, pre-K, and I'm fairly certain kindergarten and beyond, but I'm at Alderwood Early Childhood Center, we are strictly 3 to 5, so we use mostly the pre-K. Our district uses the Danielson evaluation tool. I think good teaching is good teaching. So while it probably works really great in high schools, I think it also adopts well to preschools. But when I am using the Danielson, I'm really thinking about the language that I know from using the class or classroom assessment scoring system. And one of the things from the research there is that it shows us that our early childhood educators, and I really see this a lot everywhere in my many trips to different preschools, but also at my own center, is that we as early childhood educators are really great at doing things like building positive relationships and being that secure base for kids, as well as managing the classroom and having it be very productive and operate like a well-oiled machine. But Karma spoke about this earlier. One area of improvement for us in early childhood is in that what the class calls instructional support. So that's what class calls really getting children to work the muscles of their mind. And in all my observations of my folks, I would say that's the main area I'm looking at. So the class really categorizes a way to measure, teach, and develop teachers, those executive functioning, and I can't remember what Karma called them, unlimited skills, right? We do a great job with rote counting, ABCs, but those unlimited skills like problem solving, critical thinking, brainstorming are a little more difficult to get at. And it talks about ways you can do that through open-ended questioning, those thick conversations, right, that are a lot of back and forth, that it's not just you call on a student, ask them a question, they get it wrong and you move on, but you're really having that great feedback, that back and forth conversation that looks a lot like a tennis or a ping pong match, right? You ask a question, they might not know, so you scaffold or prompt or hint, or you're asking a question that does not definitely have a correct answer. I think those are really the great questions to ask young children, right? The questions that you don't know the answer to, and getting them to answer them using more language. In terms of resources, really our greatest resources have been our partnerships through OSPI, Northwest ESD 189, and the University of Washington's College of Education and the Herring Center. We are participants in the Preschool Inclusion Champions Grant, and that's really been the backbone of our work towards creating more inclusive structures. OSPI is the grantee on that, and the grant is administered by some of our friends at Northwest ESD. So that PreK grant, or Preschool Inclusion Champions Grant, has been a way that we've been able to add some professional development, some technical assistance, coaching, and really the most important thing has been sort of facilitation of conversations between our developmental preschool teachers and general education preschool teachers and ECAP about making environments more inclusive, because it's not just as easy as putting neurodiverse kids in classrooms with kids that are neurotypically developing. There really needs to be conversations and intentional planning and dedication. And as much as everyone knows the why inclusion is important, the how to do it is quite a bit more complex. And it's hard work, but it's really, it's really the work that we have to do, I think, not just in our early childhood programs, but across our district. So we have a few other partnerships. One is through the integrated tier coaching model with our another one of our partners at UW. And this has been great because it provides sort of a choose your own adventure coaching model that's based in the building. So our teachers are the coaches, so they're learning by being coaches. And then everyone in the building can participate at some tiered level, whether it's the bottom tier, which is, self-study, reading, doing some reflection, small group at that next tier, or it's sort of the highest to that one-on-one coaching. And they've been able to come in and observe our classrooms on the teaching pyramid observation scale and give some feedback on how to provide those tiered interventions. And our developmental preschool teachers are actually really great at the top tier of interventions, but sometimes what we need is that foundation, right? That includes the natural environment. Something I noticed in the buckets here is space for loud centers and quiet centers. And one thing that we might not think about, and ERS talks about it, is that those centers shouldn't probably be right next to each other. So if you've got your cozy corner or your library right next to your dramatic play or block area, those are gonna be kind of disruptive. So it gets folks to think about what are the best ways to lay that classroom out so it can act as an additional teacher, and just makes things run so much more smoothly. The last that I'll mention, and we're not part of this, but it's something we access a lot, are the inclusionary practices demo sites. They've just got so many resources there in terms of implement inclusive environments. I believe that lots of the links to whether it's the TPOC class, Extras, or the demo sites in the chat. You can throw those in after I'm done, which is now.
Thank you so much. Okay, Darcy, what words of wisdom would you have for leaders regarding creating and supporting quality early learning environments?
Sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. That's a great question. Words of wisdom, I would say for leaders, is to focus on 2 levels of support. And the first level of support is administrator support. It's critical that your leaders, your administrators, your building leaders, your district level leaders understand what's happening and why it's so important. We've done several things in Edmonds. One of the things that I think is really kind of a unfortunate happening is that we can think about preschool and even transitional kindergarten as the purpose of it being ready for kindergarten. And I think that's unfortunate because we don't focus our 10th grade year on getting ready for 11th grade. We see the learning in that time as being really valuable and important. And so I think you have to support your administrators to have that lens, to be looking at early childhood, to be looking at the environments for young children as very important, and not important because they're going to, not important entirely because they're kindergarten readiness. So I think that requires that we really help administrators to understand the long-term return on investment. Like, why is it so important to focus on early childhood? And then also to acknowledge the fact that we are a birth to 21 system. School systems are not K-12. And so, and that may, grind on some people's teeth a little bit, but we are not a K-12 system. We are actually responsible for birth to 21, and we are responsible for, we may not be the service providers that are providing those B3 services, but we are responsible for making sure we have contracts and we have those services being provided for the children in our communities. So we have to see differently. And I think, so that's a real important context to bring. Some of the resources, I use some of the same resources with my principals. All of our elementary principals have this book as well, which just came out, was revised and came out last year. One of the resources that I think is really critical, and I think I can put this in the chat.
Alondra will do it for you, Darcy. It's okay.
Okay, great. Thanks for clarifying that, Maureen. This document is actually from the state of Michigan, and the reason I like it is because it's really simple to understand. It's really easy. It's set up kind of on a bullet points. What you should be looking for. What are the key elements of high quality learning environment? It's just very much bulleted. It's in language that everyone understands. You don't have to be an early childhood educator to understand that. And I really like that document. It's a document that I share with administrators when we're talking about early childhood specific challenges that they're having, especially if it's an administrator that is not really, maybe they're a secondary teacher that is an elementary principal and they just don't know. So they'll say, I don't know what I should be looking for in these kindergarten classrooms, right? I don't know what should I be coaching? How should I be thinking about early childhood classrooms differently? And so it's just a really helpful tool. And I think then the second level of support, and let me go back to administrators, being very intentional about your professional development, that you intentionally develop your principles, that you intentionally develop and you talk about, this is why early childhood is important, that you continue to kind of have someone who's kind of banging that drum. And then teacher support. Teacher support is also critical. Teacher support, many of our young children, many of the teachers of young children in K-12 or in a K-3 system are not endorsed in early childhood. And so they really need some grounding. They need to understand child development in a different way, or they need to look at child development in a different way as being fluid, as Karma was talking about earlier. There's ranges of what 3-year-olds typically look like. There's ranges of what 4-year-olds typically look like. And I think in a K-12 minded system, we think about pacing guides, we think about all of those things. And so we need to do some intentional support so that student voice and choice, which we talk about when we talk about project-based learning, for instance, is what it's all about in preschool. It's all about, young children are all about those projects, but not necessarily ones that are adult directed. So we need to help our teachers understand that and the differences in that. We have several documents that we, one of the things that we did when we first started, it's hard to see because I'm blurry. One of the things that we did when we first started was we did a book study on purposeful play. And so when we first started full day kindergarten, we were moving away from kind of a part day kindergarten model to a full day kindergarten model. We really focused on the state full day kindergarten guide and what that meant for for kindergarten in Edmonds School District. We developed something called a Plan, Do, Reflect document, which is kind of an adaptation of High Scope's Plan, Do, Review. And we really talked intentionally about, in order to help our students develop kind of those executive function skills and those emotion management skills, we really needed to give teachers language around how to enter in that playtime or that choice time with intentionality, and how to teach the children, oh, what do you think you might like to play? What is your plan for Plan, Do, Review? Or what we call Plan, Do, Review in our district. So what is your plan? You know, what are you going to do? And then at the end of playtime, coming back and doing a brief debrief, you know, like tell how did you follow your plan? Did it work? Did you change your plan? Where children are actually getting the opportunity to develop those skills that are so critical to later success in school and in life. So we and I think some of those resources will be available to you, but those are the kinds of ways that we or the words of wisdom that I would have for you is just to be really intentional in that.
Fantastic. Lots of kudos on that, Darcy, in the chat.
Good. I can't see it, so
I know, that's what I'm telling you. Yeah, that was great.
Yay me.
Yay. Wes, this is our last question before we move to question and answers. What is needed from top levels of leadership in the district to support and maintain this work so it continues?
Well, the one thing, I mean, a clear vision and a long-term plan is the answer. And I think one of the most helpful activities that Darcy organized in our district was this visioning activity where we just imagined what early learning looked like in 5 years. And then we sort of thought about how to reverse engineer and set immediate, short and long-term goals to get there. So, I mean, that has been so helpful to have that vision that's out there and sharing that with our teachers so that we can see that shining house on the hill, so that we know we're heading towards our due north. And then having those nesting visions, so including the superintendent and assistant superintendents in that, so that there is a vision from the top that's sort of cradling every department along the way, so that there's a commitment of resources, time, space, PD personnel, and funding, either public, private, state, or federal, to early learning and everywhere along in between. You know, our district executives and superintendent really set that tone and model for how other departments, like our communications, curriculum and learning assessment, diversity, equity, and inclusion, are going to interact and support early learning. And it's also really important that the early learning environments within the district are aligned too. So Darcy and I sort of work on both sides of the house, and we work really close on making sure that vision is shared between the different programs, hopefully moving into just having one unified Edmonds inclusive preschool program very soon. And then in terms of leadership, I mean, one great thing would be to be visible, right? Be out there. I don't know if all of the teachers I work with could name who our superintendent is right now, but I don't think any of them will forget the superintendent a few offices ago who came to our center and played with kids and sat in the sandbox and actually got his nice suit dirty to play with kids. That's the kind of thing that really makes an impression on early childhood educators and shows them that you have the time and the care to know that the work they do is really important. And like Karma said, play is hard. It's hard work. I mean, when you're doing it well and emotionally coaching and drawing out that language, from a kid who linguistically or cognitively is really earlier on in their development, that takes a lot of planning and time. And there's so much all the routines and experiences that go along with that. It really needs to, be perfectly timed. And there's a lot of development that goes into that.
Great. Thank you so much, Wes. We are a little short on time, so we are going to, I've been told, skip the Q&A and go into breakout rooms. But I just want to say to both Wes and Darcy, thank you so much for this information and for sharing. If you have a minute, go back in the chat and you can see all of the just walking alongside you and learning from you. So I know you put a lot of resources are available, and also that you're both available to chat with folks if needed. So I will turn it back over to Karma.
Great, thank you. Yes, well, we ran short on time, but not in any way short on a wealth of information. So Darcy, West, thank you so much for making time to be here with us today and just being such incredible advocates in this space. I love that you not just had the vision, and I love the approach of the vision, this 5-year plan, and working toward that. You had the vision for the environments, but also the tools and resources that you've cultivated and that you're using to sustain and improve your programs over time is really commendable. I look forward to connecting again with you both so that I can learn more about your successes and challenges. Maureen and also Sarah Southard at Northwest DSD, we appreciate the time you put into helping us bring these two amazing people here with us today. So thank you. We are going to move into our regional breakouts and are really excited to invite you to have some discussion about what you have heard today. We provide these here as discussion prompts for coordinators and breakout groups to consider what are potential harmful effects of not having developmentally appropriate environments. We heard and thought about some of the research and attention to what is and is not present in our classroom environments. And then what are the challenges or possibly who is most resistant to creating those environments and helping us achieve the kinds of classrooms that we want for young learners. So we have a Jamboard your coordinators and the breakouts will connect you with. We're going to do a little time adjustment, so we'll be sure to send a little notice when we're about 5 minutes from breaking, and we're going to come back again as a whole group before we close. So please join us after the breakouts. I think with that, I'm going to ask Alondra to go ahead and Alondra, would you tell us how this needs to work?
Yeah, I mean, I've opened up the breakout rooms already, so
okay.
If you find your ESD, go ahead and select. Looks like people are already starting to do that.
Fabulous. Thanks, Alondra. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you back here in a bit.
Karma, I'm gonna head out. I have a tier team meeting to get to, but I wanted to just say thank you for the opportunity to have us.
Pleasure is all mine. Thank you so much, Darcy. It's really wonderful. The pictures, especially, just so fantastic. Thanks for organizing that, walking us through all those great spaces.
I felt like I was just talking so fast. I just had so many things, but
so how it goes.
Yeah.
Yes, always that way. But please thank your teachers too for sharing those images with us. We really appreciate it. Yes. Wes, I don't know if you're able to hang on with us for just a little bit or if you're hopping off.
He put in the chat that he needed to move on. So,
okay.
Gosh, what a brilliant presentation.
I'm stuck in a little weird view here. I think I need to, oh, okay.
I haven't seen a breakout invite. So you need to click on, if you click on where it says more, those 3 little buttons, there should be the breakout option. And from there you can select your breakout room. If you need help, we can put you in a room too.
Thank you.
Tell me what ESD.
Thanks, Rachel.
I also don't see, where does it say more?
There's
3
like the little dots.
So kind of along the bottom where you can mute or share your video. If you go all the way over to the right-hand side, there's the little ellipses, the 3 little dots. Alondra, maybe also if you could just help folks.
Yeah. I'm
So
sorry.
I found the breakout room, but I don't know which one. Which one do I just pick
Oh,
one?
What,
Oh,
what
113. Never mind. Sorry.
got it? No problem.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Anyone else need any support getting connected? All right. I'll take a quick peek at the time here just to figure out when we want to give a 5-minute, but Maureen, I loved it. That's just so inspirational. Such a great district to feature. Thanks for organizing that.
They did great. It was fantastic. So yeah, I appreciate them. They put a lot of time and energy into that. So
really took the conversation to another level. So that's awesome.
Okay, awesome. I'm open for feedback too. If there's something I could have done differently or anything, just let me know.
No, I can't think of anything.
Okay.
All right. Well, welcome back, everyone. We just want to say thank you again for joining us today. The importance of early learning environments cannot be understated. With the release of the Near Yearbook and the Tennessee study, we should all be prepared to speak to the quality of early learning environments and why it matters. And we hope that today has helped you with that. Can we move to the next slide, please? Alondra is going to drop a feedback form link into the chat. We really hope that you will take some time to complete that for us today, if possible. The whole purpose of this network is to support you all, and we will be eagerly looking at that feedback and for ways that we can improve and continue to support your endeavors. Next slide, please. Just a little preview of our next session, which will be focused on continuity and pathways. And this will be with Valley School District will be our featured district. And that meeting will be toward the end of April there. So thanks again for being here, for everything that you are doing. And we also just would invite you to please stay with us today if you can. If you would join us for the optional networking time, you can choose to go back to your regions for continued discussion. You can request from Alondra private breakout if you wanted to do some team planning time, or please join me and others in this larger networking space. And I will be asking very specifically, what can OSPI and ESDs do to help schools assure the quality of their early learning environment? So we hope that we will see you stick around for some of those conversations. With that, I will draw the meeting to a close. We'll just give a minute or two just to encourage again that you fill out that feedback form for us. And if you're unable to join us, we hope that you'll come again next in April. I think there might be one more slide, maybe not, but I did have a link I was asking if Alondra would drop in the chat, which is just would take you to OSPI's website where we have a option to sign up for the network. So if you have colleagues or others in your district that you would like to encourage to sign up, you could follow that link and share that with them, and they can sign up to join us as well. So thanks again, and please consider staying if you can.
Just a reminder on the feedback form, you are invited to also share your notes with us if you want to link those in the feedback form as an option. We'd love to see, and we do use this feedback for planning. So
thanks, Rachel. All right, so we'll just hang out here until 10:30, just giving folks a chance to do the feedback or possibly anything, maybe take a bio break if you want to stick around with us for networking, and then we'll pick that up at 10:30. And folks are also welcome if anyone has any questions that they just want to ask before they depart. we'll be happy to open the floor for that as well. We need that beautiful music again, Rachel. Can you put that on?
Sorry, I keep getting ads. I'm not gonna mess with
That's okay. All right, it's 10:30. This is our opportunity to shift from the network to the optional networking period. So if you are interested in returning to your regions, maybe you could come off mute and let us know. Alondra will